When you spend 9 mana on a creature, you'd better get something so amazing that it's very likely to win you the game. After all, generating that kind of mana can take a very, very long time. Many creatures that are that expensive also frequently get put into play way ahead of schedule, but that takes setup too. As a result, when they design 9 mana creatures, they do usually make them pretty darn powerful. In this video, we'll look at the 10 9 mana creatures that have been the most successful at Magic's highest level of competition. This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. Use the links in the description to visit their store. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I rank cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points, this includes events like Pro Tours, and a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point. This includes events like regional championships. At number 10, it's Erupting Nullkite. You can't have a list about high mana value creatures without Eldrazi claiming some slots, and this one is an Eldrazi Dragon. It's 9 generic mana for a 6/6 flyer, and it comes with Emerge for 6 generic and 2 red. This means that you can pay that alternate cost by sacrificing a creature, which reduces the Emerge cost by that card's mana value. So Herigast comes with a built-in way to not actually spend 9 mana on him. When you cast Herigast, you can exile your hand and draw 3 cards. Herigast also gives all of your creature spells Emerge, where the Emerge cost is equal to its mana cost. So Herigast is a big flyer that can completely reload your hand while also making it easier to cast other big stuff, provided you have sacrifice fodder. Herigast is from Modern Horizons 3, which means the only 60 card formats it's legal in are Modern, Legacy, and Vintage, and since getting printed last year, it's been putting up top 8s in Modern Eldrazi ramp decks. These decks use powerful lands like Uggin's Labyrinth and Eldrazi Temple to get Eldrazi into play early, and they also feature ideal sacrifice fodder for Emerge like Writhing Chrysalis, which ramps your mana and gives you a 4 mana body to sacrifice to Emerge. Herigast is going to continue to put up top 8s in Modern, which means it has a good shot at moving higher on the list in the future. At number 9, it's Demon of Death's Gate. For 6 generic and 3 black, it's a 9/9 with flying and trample, and it also has an alternate casting cost. You can pay 6 life and sacrifice 3 black creatures instead of paying any mana. This demon doesn't feel great if you cast it the normal way, but if you can go the alternate route and get some value out of sacrificing creatures, it can be pretty powerful. Its points all came in the sideboard of black-red vampire decks while it was in standard. These decks were mostly loaded up with small creatures, but this made the deck super vulnerable against Valakut Molten Pinnacle, which turned every mountain into a lightning bolt. Those decks didn't run any removal beyond Valakut, so you were more than happy to throw away 3 small vampires early to slam a demon on the board and quickly kill them. Demon of Death's Gate hasn't put up any top 8 since 2011 though. At number 8, it's Inkwell Leviathan. For 7 generic and 2 blue, it's a 7/11 artifact creature with Island Walk, Trample, and Shroud. Trample and Island Walk make it hard to block this huge creature, and Shroud means that removing it with most traditional removal spells isn't going to work since it can't be targeted by any spells or abilities. Like many cards on the list, the downside on the Leviathan is its massive mana cost, but every deck that has ever played the Leviathan has ways around that. Its top 8s have all come in Legacy and Vintage, 2 formats with no shortage of ways to get it into play in the extreme early game. They also happen to be formats where blue is very commonly played, so it's often unblockable. It's been a frequent reanimation target in Legacy, and in Vintage it's often been put into play with Tinker or Oath of Druids. However, as creatures have become progressively more powerful, the Leviathan has fallen by the wayside as a premium creature to cheat into play. A big creature that's just really good at attacking and blocking isn't really enough these days, not when you can go with something like Atraxa, which also draws you a whole bunch of cards. So the Leviathan doesn't have any top 8 since 2022. At number 7, it's Blazing Archon. For 6 generic and 3 white, it's a 5/6 flyer that has a very powerful effect. Creatures can't attack you. In other words, if you can get this big flyer in play, you probably win the game. An asymmetrical effect like this that stops your opponent from winning the game in the typical way, coupled with a massive flyer, is going to end games pretty quickly. If they don't have removal, or you can protect your Archon, it's just over. This is another card that no one ever actually casts. Instead, they cheat it into play. It's been reanimated in Extended Legacy and Vintage, and in Vintage it's also been put into play using Oath of Druids. If you can get the Archon down on turn 2, you can shut down aggro decks before they can even aggro. So far, Blazing Archon doesn't have any top 8s in 2025, but it's so good at simultaneously stopping aggro decks and winning you the game that it's hard to count it out entirely. At number 6, it's Furnace Dragon. It has the same total score as Blazing Archon, but more first tier top 8s, so I gave it the higher spot on the list. For 6 generic and 3 red, it's a 5/5 flyer with affinity for artifacts, meaning it costs 1 generic less to cast for each artifact you control, so like Herigast, it comes with a built-in way to not actually spend 9 mana on it. When Furnace Dragon enters, if you cast it from your hand, it exiles all artifacts. That might seem like a bit of a non-bow, and I guess it kind of is, since if you ever want to cast it, you probably need to have some artifacts in play, and then the dragon takes them all away. But it was a perfect card in the metagame of Mirrodin Block Constructed and Mirrodin Standard, which were largely dominated by affinity decks. Whether you were playing Affinity yourself or not, your deck had enough artifacts to play the dragon, and when you did, it often felt like you cast Obliterate and put a 5/5 flyer into play at the same time. This is because even most lands people were playing were artifacts, so the dragon often wiped all permanents off the board, making it very hard for anyone to defend themselves against it, and then it could end the game quickly with its massive body. However, Furnace Dragon's top 8s all came way back in 2004. At number 5, it's Titanoth Rex. For 7 generic and 2 green, it's an 11/11 trampler. This creature is big, but just being a French vanilla creature isn't all that impressive compared to the 9 drops we've seen so far, which can lock down the game, wipe away tons of permanents, draw you lots of cards, or at least they're really hard to kill like Inkwell Leviathan. However, Titanoth Rex makes up for its seemingly lower power level by also having cycling for 1 generic and a green, which means you can pay that cost and discard it to draw a card, and in the case of the Rex, you also get a trample counter on a creature. So the Rex is a big scary creature that can easily put itself in the graveyard, which you know is going to work well with reanimation effects. And indeed, the Rex's points have almost all come in one particular modern deck that really takes advantage of putting a huge creature in the graveyard, and that deck is Living End. This deck is all about cycling away a bunch of creatures until you cast a card with Cascade. The deck is constructed in such a way that all the cards with Cascade always hit the 0 mana value Living End, which you can then cast for free. Then you annihilate your opponent's board and get everything back you cycled away. Titanoth Rex's massive size makes it one of the best creatures to get back, because it can end the game quite easily even on its own, and it's usually coming back with friends. Titanoth Rex is going to continue to put up top 8s in Modern. At number 4, it's Valgavoth Terror Eater. It has the same total score as Titanoth Rex, but has a higher average finish, so I gave it the higher spot on the list. For 6 generic and 3 black, it's a 9/9 with flying and lifelink. It also has wards, sacrifice 3 non-land permanents, which means if your opponent wants to target Valgavoth, they have to give up 3 non-lands or their spell gets countered. And the insane upside doesn't end there. Valgavoth exiles every card that you don't control that would be put into opponents' graveyards, and lets you play cards exiled with it. And you pay life equal to those cards' mana value rather than pay for them. So yeah, this gives you a massive creature who also lets you steal your opponent's cards, and because of Ward, your opponent can basically never come out ahead against it, and because it has lifelink and is so huge, paying life to cast the cards it exiles isn't a problem either. While everything on this list is great to get into play early, Valgavoth can be particularly nasty because if you can get it down early enough, your opponent won't even have 3 non-land permanents to sacrifice, so he'll kill them before they can ever find a way out of the situation. Despite being a relatively new card, it's put up top 8s in every format but Modern, and always in decks that can get it into play early. In Pioneer, it's typically put into play with Indomitable Creativity, and in Legacy, this is often achieved with Reanimate and other super cheap reanimation spells. Reanimate is particularly good because it's so cheap, and because the 9 life you lose to bring back Valgavoth will quickly be given back to you in a single swing. Valgavoth is going to continue to put up top 8s in multiple formats, and it could definitely make a run at the top of the list because it's so powerful and hard to kill. At number 3, it's Void Winnower. For 9 generic mana, it's an 11/9, and it punishes your opponent for playing stuff with even mana values. They can't cast even mana value spells, nor can they block with creatures with an even mana value. So sort of like Blazing Archon, this is a massive creature that has an asymmetrical effect that stops your opponent from doing stuff. Against the right opponent, they may not be able to take any actions for the rest of the game. In Standard, it saw play in mono-green ramp decks, which could play the Winnower by actually paying the mana cost, and in Modern it's made some appearances in Eldrazi ramp decks. However, in other formats it's been cheated into play ahead of schedule, including in Pioneer Indomitable Creativity decks and the similar Transmogrify deck, and in Vintage it used to be put into play with Oath of Druids. The Winnower is still putting up top 8s in Pioneer, but the 2 cards in front of it have a big lead and are quite active, so it's unlikely to ever improve its position on the list. At number 2, it's Zacama Primal Calamity. For 6 generic, a red, a green, and a white, it's a 9/9 with Vigilance, Reach, and Trample, and when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, it untaps all of your lands, and that's important because you can use those lands to use 3 activated abilities. For 2 generic and a red, it can do 3 to a creature. For 2 generic and a green, it can destroy an artifact or enchantment, and for 2 generic and a white, it can gain you 3 life. It's gained all of its points in a single deck, in a single format, and that deck is Pioneer Lotus Field, a deck which has been on top of the format for several years at this point. This deck looks to tap and untap Lotus Field a bunch to ramp into crazy stuff, and obviously Zacama is both something crazy to ramp into and a card that untaps all of your lands, which makes it even easier for you to use those powerful activated abilities, especially when Lotus Fields are getting untapped, since each of them can allow you to use 1 activated ability. Zacama is usually in the deck's sideboard, but it's fetched by Mastermind's Acquisition when it's the most advantageous as a win condition. It's going to keep gaining points in Pioneer going forward. And at number 1, it's Iona, Shield of Emeria. For 6 generic and 3 white, she's a 7/7 flyer, and when she enters the battlefield you choose a color, and your opponent can't cast spells of the chosen color. So she's in the same family as Blazing Archon and Void Winnower, since she's huge and stops your opponent from doing stuff, and her ability has the most potential to entirely lock the opponent out of the game, since stopping all their cards of a single color can shut down monocolor decks entirely, and there are also plenty of decks that aren't technically monocolored, but she can still shut down every relevant spell in the deck, like the removal spells that might have been able to kill Iona. As you can probably guess, her points have all come in decks that cheat her into play early, when she is nigh unbeatable. In Standard, this was achieved using Polymorph. In Extended, she could be reanimated by Dread Return. In Modern, she was often brought back by Unburial Rites. And more recently, she's put into play with Indomitable Creativity. Legacy is where she's done the most work though, and that's no real surprise, as that format has a ton of ways to cheat her into play, including various reanimation spells we've already seen and Show and Tell. Iona is going to continue to amass top 8s in both Modern and Legacy, securing its spot at the top of this list for the foreseeable future, but Valgavoth has the most potential to pass her. So, those are Magic's best 9-mana creatures. Do you want to get these huge creatures in play to dominate the game? If you do, check out the description where you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each card that appeared in the video. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. And if you want to catch up on past videos, including many more MTG top 10s that look at creatures of different mana values, you should see a playlist on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.